Hi, this is Rachel and Ralph's Reality Check, where we give you the inside scoop on politics, and we tell it honestly because nobody is telling us what to say, but we've been insiders for many years, having worked for politicians, and so we'll let you know what's going on behind the scenes. Ralph writes a weekly column for Newsmax, I write a weekly column for Townhall, and we will tell you what we're writing about in some of our shows. And this week we're going to discuss a couple of articles that I wrote. We'll begin with discussing what's going on in Arizona, where we now have our Attorney General Mark Brnovich has announced that he is running for the U.S. Senate. I have known Brnovich for many years. We had offices next to each other in the Attorney General's office back in 2000 to 2003. And I can tell you, he is the real deal. He used to write columns for his ASU newspaper, conservative columns, when I was writing columns for my University of Arizona conservative newspaper. So we totally bonded over that. And after he left the Attorney General's office, he went on to become the Director of Constitutional Government for the Goldwater Institute here in Arizona. Further, giving him conservative credentials. And then he went to the federal district attorney's office. And then finally, he ran for attorney general. And his record as attorney general has been very good. He has stuck to his conservative principles. He's put his neck out during the election with all the election fraud going on. And he's put himself right in the midst of all the attacks because our very liberal Secretary of State, Katie Hobbs, has now filed 12 plus bar complaints against him and his top staff at the Attorney General's office. And so he's basically decided that the U.S. Senate is the next best choice because we've got to defeat Mark Kelly, and there are very few people who can do it. Brnovich has the name recognition. He has the conservative credentials. He's got the motivation. He's not going to be like a Martha McSally candidate who, I'm sorry, she was just a little bit too laid back. That's a big part of the reason she lost that election. So Mark has what it takes. And I will tell you now, there are some other names being thrown out there who want to run for Senate, like this Jim Lamone, a businessman. And I got to be honest with you. I mean, he does not have the name recognition that it takes to win an office like that. And I don't know about his conservative credentials. He's obviously new to politics. So I don't understand why some people are jumping on his bandwagon when, for the most part, Brnovich is pretty tried and true. So what do you think about Brnovich? Ralph, you've met him.
Yeah, you were kind enough to invite me to a breakfast with him in Phoenix, and other than the fact that he's missing a couple of vowels, I think he is an extraordinarily strong alpha fighter for the little people. And by the way, yes, Rachel, show us your Brnovich T-shirt. Feel the burn, but this is the real burn, the Brnovich, a good Montenegrin. Montenegrin name. He is nobody's patsy. My sense of him from, my sense of him from having met him is that he is strong. He is a fighter. He's a fighter for the regular people. He's a fighter for law and justice. And the U.S. Senate usually turns people into marshmallows once they get elected there. So it's really, really important to have United States senators with real backbone. And Mark Brnovich clearly is a man of courage and a man of integrity and a solid conservative. I'd like to know a little bit more about what he proposes for things like economic policy, but I am satisfied with him on the basis of character. And I'm a pretty tough cookie. I don't, roll over for everybody who claims to be conservative, because I consider the biggest problem in this country not to be rhinos, but to be kinos, conservatives in name only. And he has shown that he is willing to take the heat to advance conservative positions. He has the right ideas and the right disposition, And so he certainly has my unequivocal support. And I was thrilled to see that he threw his hat in the ring for United States Senate.
And, I'm going to remind our viewers who may not know, if you haven't read all of my articles that I've written about Brnovich, here are just a few things that he has done recently. He sued the Democratic National Committee over ballot harvesting, and that case is now at the U.S. Supreme Court. He told the crooked Maricopa County supervisors to increase the number of ballots that they were auditing from 2% to 5%, which they never did, which is why we now have an audit from outside professionals going on. He has defended Arizona's election laws 6 times against lawsuits and other things when our liberal Democrat Secretary of State would not. He challenged our Democrat, at the time, it was a Democrat recorder, county recorder, that's the one in charge of elections, when they were trying to mess with the election. He backs the audit going on right now. He came out and issued a legal decision saying that the legislatures have the authority to do it. He's filed a lawsuit against Biden over delaying deportations of illegal immigrants coming over the border. And he has filed amicus curiae briefs in Second Amendment cases and religious liberty cases. Most people probably don't know all this about him because honestly, he is a pretty humble guy and he's not always out there trying to get the spotlight. Only over the last couple of months has he finally been showing up a lot on Fox News and Newsmax on TV a lot because they like him and they keep inviting him back, not because he's got some huge ego and he wants to be on. If you've ever, heard him speak or talked to him, he's absolutely brilliant. He's got a genius IQ. And so, of course, they're going to want him back to be an entertaining and well-spoken guest.
Well, I'm willing, being a man of very modest IQ myself, Rachel, I'm willing to forgive Mark Brnovich his nosebleed IQ because one other characteristic about him that I find very compelling is he is actually not too high and mighty to be staying in touch with the activist rank and file, with the activist base. I know that he turns to you, he values your opinion, he's in touch with you on a regular basis, even though he's really busy. A lot of these guys, they're our friends until they get power, they get big, they get high and mighty, and then all of a sudden, when they don't need us anymore, they disappear. That is not Mark Brnovich. Okay, I am very impressed by his sort of salt of the earth, man of the people characteristic, and I give him tons and tons of cred for his for his willingness to stay in touch with people like you and people on the ground who really know what's going on and are not afraid to tell him what they know and to advise him as to what he ought to do, as opposed to a lot of these guys, once they're catapulted to fame, they just stop they stop reaching out to you. It's not even that he takes your phone calls. He's the one who makes the phone calls to you. That is very rare in a statewide official. And I think it's actually makes him into potentially a national treasure. So I was thrilled to read in my news clips that he is declared for the United States Senate. I wish him well. I wish him the best. And above all, I wish that he will be sure to stay in touch with you and hold you and your views even closer as he advances into this, what's going to be a very, very competitive race. He's going to need the insights and the support of people just like you and your colleagues in order to win and then in order to represent the people of Arizona.
Well, his fondness for me, I think, is more like that for an annoying younger sister. I mean,
a bratty little sister. Yeah, perfect characterization of you.
We've had that type of reputation, of relationship for 21 years now, and he probably is still annoyed at me for things I used to do. Like, I used to play pranks on him. I would put a bunch of bananas hidden behind his desk against the wall at the Attorney General's office and let it just sit and rot until he had to try to figure out where the smell was coming from.
Okay, well, give us another shot of the Feel the Burn t-shirt to wrap up the Brnovich segment, and then let's move on to your fascinating column in Townhall this week, talking about why is it that the Republican governors of states like Texas and South Dakota, with their massive tourism budgets, are giving those contracts to hard left-wing operatives instead of steering them to equally capable conservative or non-political PR agencies. So that was quite the scoop, Rachel. Would you give our viewers the overview, because I've just teased it, but you're the one who actually broke the story nationally.
Well, the great thing about being in journalism is, Ralph, people just love to give you stories. So I can't wait for my next article to come out, and it's an expose on cattle rustling and cowboys in Arizona. But anyway, this current one article is about how these 3 conservative states, they've got conservative governors, have partnered with this left-wing PR firm named MMGYNJF. And the reason this one really struck me is because we are now living in an era of cancel culture. Those of us in journalism, I look at the PR realm as being very, closely related to us in journalism. We are being canceled right and left. People who know me know that the left has now come after me twice, got me, removed from my career or job twice, and I've had to recuperate. And so I see all these poor conservatives in PR, and they're being destroyed. So what is wrong with these governors? And the only thing I can think of is it's cronyism. You've got these rhinos at the top echelons of state government who have formed these cushy friendships with these PR people who have sucked up to them, and it's just, backslapping behind the scenes. I don't think it's necessarily, they're doing it because they like having a left-wing PR firm. They're doing it because these people, got to them, and they've been sitting there, they've been sitting around, maybe they have a lot of money, and so they were able to arranged, great events for these governors or something. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I wish I knew, but if you know as well as I do, Ralph, having worked for politicians behind the scenes, we know there is something funny going on, because it doesn't make any sense. If you look at what this PR firm is doing, they're out of control. They're doing this poll on the intersectionality of Latin X, and Latinos don't even like that name. That's some woke term that white people made up for Latinos. And then with the money they're going to raise from this, they're going to donate it to this organization called Travel Unity. And if you look at the events that Travel Unity puts on, it's all these woke speakers just speaking about all this radical garbage. I'm sorry, in my opinion, that's what I see much of it as. And so tax dollars are literally going that are going to end up in the hands of this Travel Unity and these woke people. And it's so unfair when, if there's plenty of good conservative PR firms out there that could use the work.
Well, we'll never know the motivation, but there's an important principle. I've been in this game since we're in pigtails, Rachel, and there's a principle called Hanlon's Law. If you're not familiar with it, congratulations, you're about to get woke. And that is, never attribute to evil what is probably merely caused by incompetence. So while you have these theories that they've got these cushy friendships and stuff like that, I just think that Republicans in general, conservatives in particular, just tend to be very, very lazy. They get in there, and instead of focusing in on who are their allies and who are their enemies and comporting themselves accordingly, they just assume the best of everybody. We're too good-natured, and instead of taking into account the ideological predilections of the PR firms, they just look at their capabilities. Now, I believe in merit. very much, and I believe in capabilities, but I also happen to know for a fact that there are a lot of really capable, conservative-oriented PR firms. I've worked closely with some of them. And I am, I think that what we need to do, exactly what you did, is to put pressure on these elected officials to say, in addition to in addition to looking at their competence, and in addition to looking at their cost, do business with your friends. The left does this all the time. The left takes care of the people on the left take care of each other. They carry out their wounded. We shoot our wounded, and that not only is that sad from an ethical point of view, but it's not good politics. What we want to do is we want to take good care of one another, and that should be including doing a little bit. I know this is heresy, Rachel, so please be gentle with me, but a little bit of pro-conservative affirmative action, darn it. Okay, there's nothing wrong once you're in a position of power to make sure that your friends, if they're competent and if they're competitively priced, are given are given the full respect due, earned by many years fighting the good fight. So Peter Drucker, the famous proto-supply sider, inventor of management as an art and a science as opposed to just a trade, okay, once said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So no matter how strategic we are, no matter how much money we have to spend in politics, no matter how brilliant our tactics are, okay, culture trumps them all. And I will give extra points and my praise, my invaluable praise, to elected officials and party officials who represent a culture of connectedness, who want to make sure that they are they're not just expecting the team to be there for them when they need them, but when they're somewhere where they can actually nurture and sustain the team, that they do that too. And so I thought your column was very important because it called out a practice that is either stupid or callous in terms of being negligent with their budgetary resources, in terms of making sure they get targeted to people who are not just capable and not just economically competitive, but also who share the capitalist worldview that these elected officials do. Why give aid and comfort to the enemy?
And I should point out in my article, I do mention that, surprisingly, Florida disappeared off the list of clients that were involved with this Latinx intersectionality poll. So, and it seems like they got scrubbed off the list after this other website brought up the fact that they were on there. So I think exposure is working. It might have worked with Governor Ron DeSantis in this case. So yeah, I mean, if other people can jump in and, expose stuff like this, the problem is a lot of people just don't have the guts. They're just scared. I mean, and I can understand. I mean, I've been threatened with lawsuits twice as a reporter. And, both times I didn't back down, and fortunately I wasn't sued because I'm not wealthy. It's not going to be easy to, defend against something like that. But I think a lot of people are afraid of ticking off the wrong person. And I just thank God that I am never going to run for elected office, because then you're really having to watch what you do or say. But as a columnist, it's much easier to write and expose this stuff. So do you want to?
Well done, Rachel. If you happen to remember your headline, so that people can go to townhall.com and read this article for themselves, I think they will find it to be well worth the 5 or 10 minutes of their time to come up to speed on this, because it was a heck of a scoop.
Yeah, it's called "Why Are Red States Hiring Democrat PR Firms?"
Great. Okay. Well, good on you. my column for Newsmax this week was postponed till next week. So next week we'll pivot around and talk about some of the things I'm saying. But why don't we now move to our blue collar blues segment of this show and talk about how the left is nefariously the lead story of today, Sunday New York Times, right column, which is the highest news real estate in the world, talks about how hedge fund managers are getting away with paying less in taxes than working people, particularly middle class people. It's a fascinating story, but it's also a kind of a dog bites man story. And that is, oh, big surprise, guys who are making $90 million a year or $600 million a year in one case have enough dough to bankroll the congressman in order to carve them loopholes. So they're paying at a 20% rate, whereas middle class and upper middle class people are paying at a top rate of 37%. And so the left is now pushing to try to get rid of the carried interest exception, which allows them to the carried interest loophole, which allows hedge fund managers and private equity managers to pay a 20% rate to try to bump them up to 37%. But Warren Buffett has said it's not right that I have to pay at a lower rate than my secretary. Now, first of all, he doesn't. I'm sure his secretary is probably making in the mid six figures, because that's what you do when you're Warren Buffett. But it's like, this is the world's smallest Victrola playing My Heart Bleeds for Thee, Warren. You can give away money to good causes, in your case, bad causes, if you feel like you've got too much money. But the fact is that human nature is such that the rich always have more power over our elected officials than we working people. It's just human nature. They have money to spread around. They have campaign contributions to make. They've got fancy jobs, $1 million a year jobs to hand out once a person loses their seat. And it's just human nature. It's just silly to believe that Congress people are not subject to all of the foibles of human nature and are not going to bend to the green. However, they've got the money, the rich people have the money, but we have the people. And so my view is, rather than violate the 10th commandment, which says thou shalt not covet, instead of trying to raise taxes on the highly successful and super wealthy, what we should be doing is pressuring them to cut our tax rates from 37% to 20%. Because I agree, it's not fair that the rich are paying lower taxes than working people. But there are two ways to handle that. One is to try to raise taxes on the rich, which just never works. They have too much political power. Or to organize us on the ground to cut our tax rates down to their tax rates, to cut our 37% top marginal tax rate to a 20% marginal tax rate. And by the way, a politician, a US Senator named Joe Biden, back in the 1980s, voted to drop the top tax rate from 70% to 50%. And then he voted to drop the top tax rate from 50% to 28%, which got a 97-3 positive vote in the United States Senate in 1986. And so the idea of creating equity can be done two ways: raising taxes on the rich, which is just not possible because they have too much power, or cutting taxes on us, because if we are just to focus and demand this and put together candidates like Ronald Reagan or Mark Brnovich to crusade on this, we did it under Reagan, we could do it again. So as a working class, middle class kind of guy, much as you, what do you think about the idea of us putting pressure on the Republican Party to demand that they cut tax rates for working people rather than letting the Democrats attempt to raise taxes on the rich?
Well, first of all, I'd like to point out that while I don't share your optimistic view of how Biden is going to turn out as a president, I will concede that he's not super far left, at least on some of these economic issues. I do think, there could be some room where he could be somewhat reasonable regarding tax rates. That being said, I think your response to that article was brilliant. Instead of, the typical clamor, oh, it's just not fair, the rich, blah, 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 we need to tax the rich more. You provided the correct response, which is, no, why don't we all just lower the rates then? We'll be at the lower, wealthy rates. The final point, though, I really want to emphasize is I thought that article was so incredibly biased because it only gave you a snapshot of the whole story. It didn't give you the whole picture. And I am a big picture person. I think that people need to know the whole story. And the whole story is, well, oh, okay, these rich people are paying a lower tax rate on one type of tax. They are paying taxes of all different kinds. If you went through and listed all the different types of taxes that rich people pay, there's probably 100. I've never actually done the exercise, but that's what's so dishonest about this type of reporting. It acts like rich people are hardly paying anything else. No, they're paying tons and tons and tons. You just don't mention it in your article. And then I'd also like to point out.
Well, Rachel, you're overly exercised about this, but you're actually you've happened on a nugget of truth. The top there have been studies about this. I've written about it in my Newsmax column. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it's something like the top 1% of the wealthy in America pay something like 10% of the top 1/10 of 1% pay something like 10% of all of the income taxes, and the top 1%, the famous the 1%, okay, pay something like 30% of all the federal income taxes, and the bottom 50% pay 0 in federal income taxes. And by the way, this all happened after Reagan cut the tax rates from 70 to 50 to 28%. The amount of money paid by the rich, it was like a bonanza. Similarly, because Biden has, I think, archly proposed raising the corporate tax rate. I think he's just pandering to his left. I don't think he really believes in this, but the data show that when Ireland cut its tax rate down to its corporate tax rate down to 12.5% from, I think it was 35% or something like that, the amount of tax revenue that came out of corporations in Ireland exploded. So Ireland made its corporations internationally rich and got rich in the process. So it was win-win. So the idea that raising tax rates somehow raises tax revenue is just dogma. Sometimes it can, but the data shows that if you cut it down to the sweet spot toward a tithe rather than towards some nosebleed rate, you're actually going to rake in more tax dollars, which then I hope that they'll use to create tax cuts for people like you and me. So I really want you to be holding President Biden's feet to the fire. If he really wants more tax revenues out of corporations, he should be proposing to cut the corporate tax rate, not raise it.
And we could go on and on about that because the left will not admit that. I'd love to see you debate one of their, Keynesian, economists on that. But I had one more point I wanted to make. Something else that irresponsible.
Bring it home, Rachel. We're running out of time.
Well, I just wanted to say, this will be the last word then. One other thing that article left out is the fact that the wealthy are the ones who create jobs and create economic opportunities. So when you give them lower tax rates, they can then invest that money and help everybody else out. And so maybe a lot of people don't agree with that. Well, on the left, but that's
I don't. I'm a Gilligan. I'm not a big fan of Thurston Howell III and Lovey, who are sitting there in their hammocks and say, "Oh, Gilligan, refresh my martini, chop chop." So
I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about the Bill Gates of the world. I'm talking about the Jeff Bezos of the world.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about some cartoon stereotype.
Jeff Bezos, and good luck to him on his 11-minute flight into outer space, okay, has created over 1 million jobs for people who otherwise would have to, take either be unemployed or take worse jobs. That said, I don't really have a soft spot for rich people. I aspire to be one, but until I get to be one, I'm like, I want to fight for us workers. That does not mean punishing people for their success. That is class warfare. That is the Communist Manifesto. That is anti thou shalt not covet. That is not the American way. And so while I find it very, very fetch that you were fighting for, that you were going to the mat for rich people can take care of themselves. On the other hand, punishing them by squeezing them does nothing for either tax revenues or working people or the poor.
I don't see how I'm fighting for rich people and you're not. You're the one who said we should lower the tax rates for everybody to the same that rich people have. So you're going bad for rich people too, if you want.
The secret I once wrote a column about Forbes about this is that Republicans hate poor people. It's just a fact of life. And so they have a secret plan to make poor people rich because they love rich people. And so the Republicans, when they're guided by people like you, smart people like you, have a secret plan to eliminate the poor by making them all rich. Ha, 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 ha. They hate them not because they hate poor people, but because poor people vote for Democrats, which is, of course, detestable. So our secret plan, big reveal here, Rachel, is we know how to make all the poor people rich, and then they'll vote Republican. How lovable is that?
Okay, you got the last word. That was priceless. Feel the burn.
Thank you, Rachel. Feel the burn. See you next week.
All right. Thanks everybody for watching.